Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has been killed in a large-scale joint U.S. and Israeli operation, a move that marks one of the most significant and destabilizing events in the Middle East in decades. Confirmed by Iranian state media early Sunday, Khamenei's death at the age of 86 has left the Islamic Republic facing an unprecedented political vacuum and raised fears of a broader regional conflict. U.S. President Donald Trump announced the death hours before state media reports, calling the event the greatest chance for Iranians to reclaim their country from decades of clerical rule. According to satellite imagery released by Airbus, the airstrike targeting Khamenei's Tehran compound caused extensive destruction, suggesting a meticulously planned operation aimed at striking the core of Iran's leadership. State media described Khamenei as someone who consistently positioned himself at the forefront of the nation's affairs, confronting what Iranian officials have long termed global arrogance. Though in the West and among critics, he was viewed as a symbol of authoritarianism and one of the most ruthless leaders in modern history. President Trump characterized him as one of the most evil people in history in a social media post, warning that U.S. operations, described as precise and ongoing, would continue in order to dismantle Iran's nuclear capabilities and military infrastructure. The killings were not limited to Khamenei alone. Iranian state media reported that top figures within the country's security apparatus, including the head of the Revolutionary Guard and a senior security advisor, Ali Shamkhani, were also killed. The Revolutionary Guard's commander, General Mohammad Pakpour, had taken over after Israel eliminated the previous leader during a conflict last June, making this latest strike part of a larger ongoing effort to weaken Iran's military hierarchy. Eyewitnesses in Tehran reported mixed reactions, while some residents expressed relief and even celebrated the news from rooftops with cheering and whistles. Mourners in Mashhad raised a black mourning flag over the Imam Reza shrine, highlighting the deep divisions and emotional intensity within Iranian society. The Iranian government declared 40 days of public mourning and a 7-day nationwide holiday to honor Khamenei's death. Reports also suggest that several of Khamenei's close relatives, including a daughter, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, and grandchild, were killed in the airstrikes, further compounding the national trauma. The operation, reportedly planned for months, was carried out during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan and coincided with the start of Iran's workweek. U.S. officials emphasized that the strikes were aimed at Revolutionary Guard command centers, air defense systems, missile and drone launch facilities, and military airfields, with the goal of neutralizing Iran's capacity for nuclear enrichment and regional aggression. The U.S. military reported no casualties on its side, despite hundreds of Iranian missile and drone attacks in response. Israel confirmed it had struck hundreds of targets and eliminated key Iranian defense figures, including the commander of the Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Secretary of Iran's Security Council. President Trump described the operation as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the Iranian people to take back their nation, urging the Revolutionary Guard to surrender and promising immunity to those who lay down arms, while warning of certain death for those who resist. Iran retaliated almost immediately, firing missiles and drones toward Israel and U.S. military installations in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar. Israeli authorities reported dozens of missile attacks, many intercepted by defense systems, though casualties occurred, including a woman killed in the Tel Aviv area. Explosions were also reported near the Intelligence Ministry building in northern Tehran, with local air defenses engaging the attacks. In southern Iran, airstrikes reportedly killed at least 115 people when a girls' school was struck, with dozens more wounded, according to local officials. IRNA reported additional deaths across the southwest, including strikes on residential areas, a sports hall, and infrastructure near schools. The attacks disrupted flights across the Middle East and sent shockwaves through nearby countries, including the United Arab Emirates, where shrapnel from missile attacks killed one person in Dubai. The escalation has already drawn reactions from neighboring nations. Saudi Arabia confirmed it repelled missile attacks targeting its capital and eastern regions. Bahrain reported damage to 3 buildings in Manama and Maharak City from drone strikes and debris. Kuwait's Civil Aviation Authority reported drone strikes on its main international airport, injuring several employees, while the Ali Al Salem Air Base saw 3 troops injured. Jordan intercepted dozens of drones and missiles, asserting it had dealt with a significant attack. These developments underscore the potential for wider regional escalation. As countries across the Gulf brace for fallout from the U.S.-Israeli operation, the operation also has significant implications for global energy markets. The Strait of Hormuz, through which a third of the world's oil exports pass, faces heightened risks, raising concerns over the stability of energy supplies. Any disruption could send crude oil prices sharply higher and strain economies reliant on Gulf oil. Analysts warn that prolonged military activity in the region could trigger a spike in energy costs and increased geopolitical tensions worldwide. U.S. congressional leaders expressed concern over the operation. Democrats criticized President Trump for taking military action without explicit congressional authorization, though the White House maintained that several leaders from both parties had been briefed in advance. Meanwhile, President Trump reiterated his goal of dismantling Iran's nuclear infrastructure, claiming that intelligence indicated Tehran was rebuilding capabilities, including high-quality centrifuges necessary for producing weapons-grade uranium. The president emphasized that while he sought to avoid prolonged engagement, decisive strikes were needed to prevent Iran from re-establishing a nuclear threat. Iranian authorities, while hoping to avert a full-scale war, maintained their right to uranium enrichment, with intelligence reports suggesting the country is assessing the impact of strikes on nuclear and military facilities. The country also continues to grapple with internal dissent following nationwide protests against clerical rule and economic hardship. Human rights organizations report over 7,000 deaths during the crackdown on protests, with thousands more injured, highlighting the ongoing domestic instability that the leadership vacuum may further exacerbate. The situation has opened a complex chapter in U.S.-Iran relations. Analysts note that removing Khamenei eliminates the central authority of Iran's clerical system, but the absence of a clear successor raises questions about how the country will be governed. Iran has reportedly formed an interim council to maintain governance until a new supreme leader is chosen, though the Revolutionary Guard remains a powerful force capable of retaliatory strikes. Experts warn that the lack of political clarity in Tehran may trigger internal conflicts, sectarian tension, and opportunistic violence targeting U.S., Israeli, and allied interests in the region. Eyewitness accounts from Tehran describe a city in shock and heightened tension, with air raid sirens, missile interceptions, and military deployments visible throughout the capital. In Mashhad and other major cities, public mourning and protests coexist with celebrations in certain neighborhoods, reflecting deep divisions among the population. International observers warn that these divisions may complicate efforts to stabilize the country in the coming weeks. Global reactions have been cautious but tense. European leaders have urged restraint on all sides, emphasizing the risk of regional escalation. United Nations officials are calling for immediate dialogue to prevent further civilian casualties, noting that the strikes during Ramadan, a religiously significant period, risk inflaming sectarian tensions and fueling anti-Western sentiment. Analysts predict that unless diplomatic measures are urgently taken, Iran may expand its attacks against U.S. allies and military assets across the Middle East, potentially drawing in neighboring powers into direct confrontation. The U.S. and Israeli military buildup in the region represents the largest deployment of American forces in decades, signaling a readiness for sustained operations if required. Naval assets, aircraft, and missile defense systems have been positioned strategically, with U.S. commanders emphasizing rapid response capabilities. President Trump, in public statements, stressed the importance of neutralizing Iran's proxy networks and naval capabilities, warning that any attacks against U.S. forces or allies would be met with decisive retaliation. The implications for civilians remain dire. Schools, residential neighborhoods, and public infrastructure have already suffered significant damage. Hospitals are overwhelmed with casualties, and reports indicate shortages of medical supplies. Humanitarian organizations are calling for immediate access to affected areas to prevent further loss of life. Economic disruptions across Iran, including damage to ports, industrial centers, and oil facilities, are expected to have long-term consequences for the country and the region. The death of Ayatollah Khamenei and the broader military campaign signify a turning point in Middle Eastern geopolitics. For the U.S., the operation represents a demonstration of military reach and strategic coordination with Israel, while for Iran,